I built a Japanese koi pond, except instead of koi, it's filled with Megalodon. Welcome back to Jurassic Park Japan in Jurassic World Evolution 2. After creating a somewhat weird shape with the lagoons, I lined the entire perimeter with lagoon rock platforms. Shout out to Rob Earth for pointing me to a mod that changes the colors of these rocks. I went back with the terrain tool to make the edge of the lagoon even more random, following the shape of the rocks that I had placed down. I really wanted to hide the pretty standard shapes that our lagoons necessarily form so it looks more organic, and bringing the ground closer to the water's edge will also allow us to get the path closer in a later step. After that, I went in with the regular rocks and reeds to make it look more natural. The idea for Jurassic Park Japan is to use only Asian species, but the selection of modded Asian lagoon species was very limited, and of the ones available, I just didn't quite like the look of any of them. So when Sari Carter suggested in a previous video, Meg Koi Farm, I jumped on that. Perfect excuse to use my beloved Megalodon, which is a global species, so fossils have been found in Asia and even specifically in Japan. A koi farm is very different from a koi pond. I went with the latter because that just looks a lot nicer, but I will be sticking an ungodly amount of Megalodon in that pond. Random fact about me, my parents had a koi pond at their previous house, the house where I grew up, from a baby square to a big square. So I have a lot of fun memories linked to koi ponds and koi fish. Because of that, I know that growing water lilies in a koi pond comes with challenges, because koi are pond pigs. They like nosing through the bottom of the pond looking for food and tend to destroy plants. So it was always a victory when the lilies managed to actually bloom. This meg pond isn't plagued by this issue. I added big clusters of water lilies, and I think that ended up looking amazing. Easiest way for me to do this was to create the clusters on land off to the side, select them all with Kai's toolbox, and then move them over. Doing this would put them perfectly on the level of the water. I wasn't planning on this, but there was enough space behind the lagoon to sneak a path back there, and I thought it would be cool to have the path go through a cave, so I stuck two bat caves together. This path would go behind the waterfall. I raised up some terrain as a scaffold and built a wall out of rocks against it, just an easy way to go about it. Then I grabbed them all and moved them into position. This would be the backdrop of the waterfall. In the end, the extra step of creating a scaffold and moving the rocks over was unnecessary because I had enough space to raise the terrain in the spot itself and needed to do that anyway to bulk out the little mountain for our waterfall. But still, a tip if you do need a rock wall in a place where you can't just raise the terrain as well. Raise the terrain elsewhere, build a rock wall, and move it over. That way, you skip the step of having to painstakingly move the rocks vertically with Kai's toolbox. We are leaning into the fact that this obviously has to be a man-made waterfall. So I put a water tank at the top as a dispense, and then off to the side I place the maintenance shed with the pipes going into the water. This creates the illusion that there is a pump taking water out of the lagoon and pouring it out from the top of the waterfall. And then of course we place the waterfall itself. Unfortunately, with how the modded waterfalls are made, being a big arch, you could see the water at the back of the cave. Luckily there was enough space between the lagoon and the map border that I could just move the caves further away and then use more rocks to build out the mountain to hide the unnecessary part of the waterfall. Adding the splash at the bottom completes the waterfall, and I think it definitely adds to the koi pond. In the front, I'm raising up a bit of terrain to create an elevated platform from which guests can look out over the koi pond. Even though I will be adding viewing attractions, viewing from the path, even though it doesn't technically work in the game, is my go-to. For the stupidity barrier, I'm using one of the walls from my Japanese decorations mod, made by Viral Cyclops, and I sink these down to get them at the right height. It's a bit more work than using regular fencing, but it brings back the Japanese identity in a small and subtle way. We'll come back to this platform later. First, I did just line the rest of the koi pond with the low log wall. By the way, just a reminder that all the mods I use are linked in the Google Doc in the description box, and most of the mod titles speak for themselves, so it's easy to find what you're looking for. I placed a pagoda at the back of the pond, but rather than have it be just decorative, I clipped a restaurant and restroom into this. I feel a theme park would 100% do this. Build a fake pagoda to turn it into a sushi restaurant, or whatever else might be profitable. One of the inspirations for this build is this image right here of a torii gate out on the water reflected in the surface. So that's what I recreated. I tried sinking the lagoon rock down a little bit to get it under the surface, but unfortunately, for some reason, you can't do that. So it'll stay like a little island for the torii gate. It still creates the same effect of seeing the gate reflected in the water. Now we're back to working on the platform, and I ran into an issue that would haunt me this build, but also led to one of my favorite parts of the build. For the path throughout the park, I'm taking inspiration from Japanese Zen gardens, which have patterns raked into sand. I used those lines at several parts in the park already, and I want to continue that to keep a design consistency throughout the park. Unfortunately, to create thin parallel lines, you need to delete little bits of path, and all the rocks don't allow you to do that. If you go into the delete tool, instead of being able to grab the path, you just grab the rocks underneath. So I barely managed to get some lines onto the platform, and I realized that my plan to add these lines all around the pond wouldn't work. So as I was laying down path, I was thinking, what can I do with a path? And I ended up creating some shapes that led to the return of Crazy Path Lady. But that comes later. In terms of viewing attractions, I added 2 to the koi pond. The first being a tower to give a top-down perspective, a classic way to enjoy the view of a koi pond. But to get a better look at the Megalodon, I also added an underwater viewing dome. To be honest, I didn't do much with customizing the lagoon underneath the surface, as I typically don't really do, except for adding kelp. Especially underneath the water lilies, so it kinda, if you squint, looks like the stems reach the bottom, instead of the lilies just floating with no roots in the ground. For the above water foliage, I used the red temperate trees as substitutes for Japanese maples. The Japanese maple is a staple in Japanese gardens, so I wanted to get those colors into the park, and I think they look especially great around the lagoon where the red and orange contrast with the blue of the water. I think that by not using them all over the park and only in a specific place, you more or less avoid them looking seasonal and like a biome, and instead just purposefully planted Japanese maple trees. Kinda. Off to the side of the lagoon, I built a little decorative pond. Of course, I was tempted to put a bridge over the lagoon itself somewhere, but I figured I should avoid the safety hazard, and instead I kind of played with that with this pond, because as you will see at the end, I put a Meg statue in there jumping out of the water towards the bridge. And in another cutout in the path, I placed a fountain as a base for a holographic Megalodon. This is a trick I've done a short on a while ago, showing how to do this without mods. But with mods, with Kai's toolbox, it's way easier. You do have to use your imagination, but you have to pretend this is a hologram. I think aiming colored lights at it helps sell the illusion that it's nothing more than a 3D projection. It's not everyone's taste, but as I said in previous episodes, Japan for me is characterized by both the beauty of tradition and hyper-modern technology, so a hologram was a perfect fit within that vision. Because I wasn't able to do the thin lines the way I have been doing throughout the park and wanted to do around the lagoon, I created this random semicircular shape, and when I was done, I thought, that kinda looks like a fan. And that simple thought revived the Crazy Path Lady in me. I had the idea to use the giant plaza between the hotel and the lagoon for fan path artwork. In case you are one of the many new people who joined the channel as of late, you might not know this, but in the early days, the very early days, the prehistory, if you will, the channel was called Crazy Path Lady because my thing in Jurassic World Evolution 1 was to create path art, these crazy designs using the path. For Jurassic World Evolution 2, I haven't really been doing that because the second game has more decorative options for a park. And so instead of focusing on the aerial perspective of the park, which was the only way we could introduce a decorative element, I build a park in a way now that I think looks good from the ground perspective, the guest perspective. So instead of building huge plazas in crazy shapes, I prefer flowing paths with lots of decorations. But for this one, I was compelled to do some path art again. And honestly, this one is pretty simple, but effective. My first attempt at the flowers, I quickly decided I didn't like. At this scale, it is difficult to do a lot of detail. Actually, it's impossible to do detail. But one thing I remember from art classes in high school is that when it comes to flowers, the number of petals are really important. And a cherry blossom flower has 5 petals. So that, I told myself, I at least need to achieve. And I'm pretty happy with how the new flowers turned out. Again, because these are basically as small as you can make them with the path tool, they aren't fantastic, but the available space really didn't allow for anything bigger and thus better. I did figure out I could add some detail with decorations though, but first I had to fill in the rest of the fan, and this was a pretty tedious task because you have to choose the right place to connect the path to avoid path clipping, which would ruin the design. I think we're all familiar with the struggles of ugly path clipping, but there's almost always a way to connect paths without clipping issues. You just have to figure out where to connect them through trial and error. I gave the fan a serrated edge to hint at the folds in an actual fan, which I think does the trick decent enough. Now on to adding some 3D details. Starting with adding some lines in the flowers using these signs sunk into the ground so only the top will show. I used white to brighten up the flowers a little bit because the pink path with this mod is kinda dull, but in hindsight maybe red would have been the better option. If I can still grab these signs, I might switch them out at least to test it. For the center of the flowers, I used a fountain and then put a cherry blossom tree at the center of each of those. The last step was to add a lot of Megalodon and create a very colorful school to mimic a colorful school of koi fish. I'm really happy with how this concept came to life, so I'm excited to give you a mini boots on the ground tour of this area before we head into the cinematic showcase at the very end. So if you recall, on top of this huge hotel is the Innovation Center, and that is actually the entrance of the park. The monorail arrives here. So you can enter the park this way and, go towards the pagoda, or you could just, after going to your hotel room, exit the hotel here, and then you come out onto what is now the Fan Plaza. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of a tour of this area. So I'll drop us down. So again, we'll just, we're pretending that we come out here, and you see right away, the beautiful red trees simulating the Japanese maples. You see flying Megalodon. We charge extra for those, and of course you have the pagoda, which looks really lovely the way it's silhouetted like that. And this huge plaza is, as you can tell from the ground perspective, a little pointless, but we'll add some shops around here to liven it up. And you would imagine that, it would be full of people. But yeah, let's just walk around the koi pond, which is viewable from all the way around. So you can just come up to the fence and you can see the Megalodon swimming around. And I really like this perspective. Obviously you can see them better from an underwater perspective, but I think this is pretty cool. We have the shark feeder in front of the waterfall, and then if we walk around here... Now, this isn't finished yet because, there's just so much work still left to be done. But on our right is going to be the Werehousaurus habitat and, continuing into the rest of the park. And then on the left, we have the koi pond. We can look down like this. This is a nice perspective, Shark feeder is really close by. We have the Torii Gate in the water, the pagoda, the waterfall. Yeah, pretty cool perspective. And then let me speed up a little bit. Again, you can stop at any point and look into the koi pond. with the exception of when you go through the cave, and I love the fog. This area of the map seems to generate... Oh, I need to cover that up with a bush or something. But this like back area of the map seems to generate a lot of fog really frequently, so I think that's very cool. Also, I finally sort of found a use for these planters, you know, like a wavy line at the back of this path. And then here we have the sushi pagoda. And also looking at it like that, you see the huge aviaries in the background, you see the huge hotel with the innovation center on top. I think that's super cool. So yeah, I was happily surprised that we could fit all of this back here. Torii gates. Oh man, I just love this area. So cool. And I really like the red trees. Like, obviously they don't have like quite the right look for Japanese maples, but they do the trick. They do the trick. Look at that. Now just imagine, you know, that rock wall needs to be finished, but that's gonna be good. Oh, there goes the train. And then this is the entrance to the underwater viewing. There. Oh. And yeah, there are so many Megalodon in here that you're basically always guaranteed to have cool shots like this. Like, look at it. It's absolutely teeming with Megalodon. I think that's really cool. And it creates a really cool effect from the top as well. Like, you always see these colorful sharks swimming around. Yeah, I love this. So we exit that and continue walking around. We go through another cave. Speeding up. I added those lovely gates to the start and end of my bridge that goes over the Sauropod Valley, which I think gives it a little bit more of a Japanese look. Just a little, and actually, yeah, I quite like how that turned out. And then here we have just a little pond, and we can't actually go onto this bridge, but yeah, just imagine that you can, and then halfway through you can look into the gaping mouth of this Megalodon statue that comes bursting out of the water. Which is, the reason why I didn't add a bridge on top of the actual koi pond, to sort of avoid, you know, evoking that primal fear. But look at this! This looks gorgeous. This game still makes me so happy. Just breaking up the path a little bit with some restaurants. From this end, we look into the Sauropod Valley. Looking good. And then if we go around here, this is one of my favorite little random things about this build, which are these like flower-inspired shaded areas. And I used the Jurassic Park curved walls just sunken down to create a little bit of a border, so, you know, people wouldn't be, you know, cutting through the tables and chairs to get to from point A to point B. They have to walk around, which secludes the seating section a little bit, makes it a little bit more peaceful. And over here as well, just a semicircle with the flower in the middle, and these look super cute from the top down. It's a really simple seating section, but I think it's quite effective and quite artsy, honestly. Now we're... Oh god, I need to go this way around the fountain. And now we're coming back up on the huge hotel. And in front of the huge hotel, we also have the Megalodon hologram. Which I know not everyone likes, but I think it's quite a cool effect if you use a bit of imagination. Let's pretend that I didn't forget to go up onto the raised platform that overlooks the koi pond. And I added like a decorative combination here using the Megalodon jaws, which comes from the Fossil Decorations mod by Viral Cyclops, and it's double-sided. So we have the red illuminated jaws on this side, and then on the other side, you know, the side facing the sun, it's just like that. You see a little bit of the red actually from the lights behind it. That's kind of cool. Yeah, just, you know, cute little seating section, fountain. You can have little sits here, or you can go up to, you know, the binoculars and have a look around, or just look over the edge. Oh, we have more flying sharks. Oh, this one is really going for it. I felt like raising the terrain and give this path perspective was pretty important, and I really like how this turned out and all of the different elements that we can see from here. We'll end this video with a cinematic, and I hope to see you again for the next episode of Jurassic Park Japan, and stay tuned for any news, hopefully soon, on Jurassic World Evolution 3. Thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and until next time, enjoy the game.